Hey everybody, we are back. This is the last lesson of the year if you've done these in order, but we've kind of glazed over. We've brought this up several times, but for as important as it is in Iowa, maybe we should have talked about this sooner. We are going to talk about soybeans today. So I have a cup of these, and you can see that they're very small. They grow in a pod, and this pod is like from harvest. And when they're completely done growing, that plant dies, the pod dries out, it's like crunchy, and these are very hard when they're ready to be harvested. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the life cycle of a soybean, which you did learn in second grade, so this isn't brand new to you, but we want to just kind of review that life cycle. And then there's one more activity your classes have the option of doing where you'll learn a little more about what those soybeans are used for. If you think back to October, we talked about biofuels, and we said that the oil in soybeans can be used to make biodiesel, so a biofuel for those diesel-powered engines. And so when we break these apart when they're processed, they are broken into two parts. There's oil in each of these, but that solid soybean meal is also ground for livestock to eat. The oil is what's usually used in products for people, whether it's biofuel or food or bioplastic, any of those things. So you should have this page, and as you hear this book, I want you to be filling in the life cycle as you go. You have all the terms you need at the top, and you can see that the first one is a seed, a bigger picture. So we're going to start with that seed. We'll check this together, but see if you can fill in all the parts of that life cycle as you're hearing about this. Pod to plate, the life cycle of soybeans. Winter in the Midwest is cold and snowy. The soil rests, waiting for spring. Soon the snow will melt, the air will warm, and it will be time to plant the soybeans. The farmer will use a tractor and planter to plant the soybean seeds. The seeds need to be planted at the right depth and spacing. Farmers use settings on the planter and computers in the tractor to plant them correctly. Soybean plants grow very quickly. In the heat of summer, they can grow an inch a day. The plants will be 3 to 4 feet tall when they are done growing. Plants need 4 things to grow: water, air, sunshine, and nutrients from the soil. In the summer, small flowers called blossoms bloom on the plants. When pollinated, these blossoms will turn into pods. A soybean plant will have 60 to 80 pods, and there will usually be 3 soybeans inside each pod. As the soybeans grow, farmers watch for pests that can hurt the plants. Insects can eat the leaves, stems, and roots. Weeds steal nutrients and water away from the soybeans. Plants can get diseases too. To keep plants healthy, farmers can use insecticides, herbicides, or fungicides to control the insects, weeds, or diseases. A healthy plant produces more soybeans. In the fall, the soybean plants are at the end of their life cycle. They turn from green to brown and the leaves fall off. The beans inside the pod begin to dry and become hard. When this happens, the soybeans are ready to harvest. Farmers use large machines called combines to cut the stems and separate the soybeans from the pods. Once the soybeans are harvested, semi-trucks or wagons take them to large grain bins that hold the beans. These bins can be on the farm or at a grain elevator. From there, the soybeans are sold to companies that will make them into things we use every day. Many of the soybeans grown in the United States are sold and exported to other countries. Trains, barges, and ships carry soybeans from where they are grown to countries all over the world. The rest of the soybeans are used here in the United States. Soybeans are usually broken apart or processed before they are used. The beans are heated and ground into soybean meal. Meal is an excellent source of protein. Soybeans are also full of useful oil. The soybean oil is squeezed out of the meal. Soybean meal is a wonderful food for farm animals. Pigs, beef and dairy cows, Chickens and even fish eat soybean meal. The protein in the soybean meal helps the animals grow and be healthy. These animals make food for you to eat like bacon, hamburgers, milk, chicken, eggs, and fish. Soybean oil, protein, flour, and lecithin are in foods that we eat every day. Soy can be found in soup, bread, yogurt, cheese, peanut butter, salad dressing, snacks, and even chocolate. You may also eat it in tofu, soy milk, soy burgers, and soy sauce. Large trucks, buses, tractors, and combines use a fuel made from soybean oil called biodiesel. Biodiesel is better for the air because it burns cleaner than regular diesel. Soybeans can also be used to make crayons, paints, and the ink used to print books and newspapers. Soybeans are renewable and environmentally friendly. Building materials like insulation, plastic, countertops, and glue can be made from soybeans. You have many products made with soybeans in your home. Lotion, makeup, pet food, and car seats are just a few of the things we make with soybeans. This family grows soybeans, and the fields surround their backyard. They take pride in growing food for other people. They work hard to protect the land and water around them for their family and yours. As you heard that book, it might have been familiar to you. You did hear it as second graders. You probably could have filled in this life cycle without that book because of your background knowledge as fourth graders, but let's check it together really quick. At the top of your page, you see a section that says all plants need. Let's skip that for a second and we'll come back to it. So let's focus on the bottom half of your life cycle here. So if we start, you know that we start by planting a seed. Once a seed has enough warmth and water, doesn't even have to be sunlight, that could be warmth from your pocket, okay? Once there's enough warmth and water, a plant germinates or a seed germinates. This little tail is called a germ, and that's what will form roots. As it keeps growing, it will sprout. Then it becomes what we call a growing plant. Midsummer to late summer, those plants will grow flowers. The flowers will turn into a small pod. You can see they're pretty small, even when they're done growing. So even smaller than this.
Well, maybe we should back up and say when there's the flower, it's not like an actual big flower. It's more like a bloom.
It's more like a little bloom. It's not like a bouquet of flowers. Yeah, they're very small.
And they would have saw that in the book.
They're little purple flowers. So those flowers will turn into a little pod. That pod stays green as it continues to grow, and each one usually has 3 beans inside. And then the final stage, once the plant dies and dries out, we have this mature brown pod, and these are what we harvest. This pod stays in the field, and when we harvest, we're just harvesting this cup of beans. A lot more than a cup, but we're just harvesting those beans. We're going to focus on the top half and talk a little bit about what any of our plants would need to grow.
All right. Plants need. So we'll start with, we know that in Iowa we have rich soil. So plants need soil.
Okay, so over here, if you're looking at your paper, this is on the left-hand side because these are things any plant would need.
Yep.
We'll come to that right side when we talk just about soybeans in a moment. So soil.
Plants need air. We have clean, fresh air in Iowa. Plants need water. We're blessed with timely rains. And plants need sun.
Okay, now if we move to the right side, it says soybeans also benefit from these elements. Now, elements are things that naturally occur in nature. You'll learn more about this in high school when you talk about the periodic table of elements, and you've possibly seen that before. But there's 3 different elements that we like our plants to have, and we test our soil. We send off samples of that soil to labs where they break it apart and test to see how much of each of these elements is there. And when farmers get that report back that tells them about their soil, they make decisions about whether or not they need to add these things. And that's what we're doing when we add fertilizer. So the first thing our plants need is nitrogen. Now I have to tell you something interesting about nitrogen. Any plant that has a pod is called a legume. It's kind of hard to brainstorm what else might be a legume. But if you think of peanuts, their shell is also a pod. And so peanuts are also legumes. Legumes make their own nitrogen. So in Iowa, our farmers often rotate crops. That means one year they plant soybeans, the next year is corn, and they go back and forth. Corn especially needs a lot of nitrogen. So if you plant soybeans in the soil the year before, they produce nitrogen and it stays in the soil, and it's a big benefit to corn. So that's one of the big reasons you'll see farmers rotate those crops. Okay, I am in a soybean field, but if you look really closely, you can see these dried corn stalks. And that's because typically farmers rotate their crops, or that means they go every other year. So last year there was corn planted in this field, and the nutrients that are in the soil from that corn are a benefit, they're a help to these soybeans. So this year they're soybeans, and next year we'll go back and plant corn here. But you can see that there's still kind of left over, and that's a benefit to our soil. It kind of helps keep our soil in place and prevent erosion. But this whole soybean field is growing pretty well here for June. Okay, the next thing we like to add is
phosphorus.
Okay, so that P stands for phosphorus. And that is something that keeps the plant healthy. It's going to help fight off disease. Okay, the final thing we add. On the periodic table, it's represented with the letter K. I'm not sure why, I'll be really honest. I would have to Google that, and you could do that too. But K stands on the periodic table for potassium. So our plants need potassium. It helps them fight off disease again, and it grows a stronger stem. So that potassium is important. So N, P, K. Those are 3 elements that we add into our soil often if they are not already there. Okay, as I said at the beginning, your teacher may or may not have one more activity for you. If you are playing the game, you'll want to read this extra information. There's just a couple things we left out there. So you'll want to read a little more information about some of the products we get from soybeans. And then, I'm sure you've played this before, I have who has. So if I said, you'd have to start with a start card. So if you had a start card, of course I can't find mine. It's probably like the last one. Okay, here's the start card. It says, I have soybeans. Who has the nutrients needed to grow soybeans? That would be the person who has NPK. So then you would read your card and say, I have NPK. Who has? And you would read yours. There is a card that says finish. You aren't done until every person has connected. You might have someone in your class who has more than one card, because there's usually more cards than people. But this is a fun game to test out what you've learned about soybeans and to learn a few more things. Thank you guys for joining us.